Hi, it's Mark DeVries with Ministry Architects, and I want to spend a little bit of time with you today talking about building sustainable teams, recruiting, especially building a volunteer team. And so we're going to start with just kind of a shifting of our perspective. A lot of times we think of ministry as that the pastor is really the one that does the ministry, and everybody else is the pastor's kind of little helper. And the model we want to shift from, I sort of consider that as like the camp counselor model. Like the pastor is responsible for doing all of the ministry. And in fact, if we take scripture seriously, where it says, we are responsible for the equipping of the saints to do the work of ministry, our work is less like a camp counselor and more like a relationship architect, where we are building this constellation of relationships around those in our congregation, and particularly this sort of grew out of a conversation around youth ministry and children's ministry. We surround youth and children with an appropriate, significant collection of godly adults that have the together sort of form this ecosystem that helps to shape and form their faith for a lifetime. And so we begin just by considering we're not just about recruiting helpers for the pastor. We're about empowering people to do the ministry that they are uniquely called to. So that kind of frames our conversation, seeing this less as a single line and more of creating a web of relationships, a web of leadership, right? So just for fun, we dreamed a little bit about what if Jesus recruited his disciples the way that a lot of churches recruit their volunteers. And we just made up what the scripture would have sounded like if Jesus were using our recruitment methods. And verily Jesus saw Peter busy with his day job and said reluctantly unto him, "Listen, man, I need you to do me a favor. Nobody's responded to my note in the bulletin, and I can't get anybody to help on this thing I'm putting together. I don't know whatever happened to commitment, but hey, whatever. I just need you to spend some time with me once a month. You and Nathaniel and Judas, you can do it on a rotating basis. Look, I know you're busy, but if you do this, I'll definitely owe you one. If not, we're canceling the Last Supper." That tends to be the way we think about recruiting. And I think I am convinced, absolutely convinced, that there is a more direct, much more effective way. In fact, some of you may know that I have put out there a $100 bet that if you use this recruiting model for your volunteers, if you use this recruiting model and spend 2 hours a week on it for 6 months, you'll have all the volunteers you need. And if you don't, I'll pay you $100, no questions asked. Here's what we've learned about sustainable recruiting. Leaders don't typically volunteer. They are invited. The people that we want to serve on our teams and actually carry real live leadership, they're already involved in other things right now. They're often not looking to some place to volunteer. So we need to be thinking about inviting them rather than passing around the proverbial clipboard around the circle, which has pass around a clipboard that nobody signs around a circle or around a sanctuary. It just communicates nobody around here volunteers. We do it the way Jesus did it, which is to invite them, recruit them, invite them one at a time. Sometimes I say, if nobody responded to your plea in the bulletin, you're right on schedule. That's what happens to these sort of shotgun announcements. And then finally, we just never want to say no for someone else. I hear, as we've worked this process in a lot of different churches, we've heard people say, well, they'll never say no. They'll never do it. They'll never say yes. And we just say, well, what do you lose by asking them? Even if they say no this year, you're getting on their radar to perhaps say yes in a year or 2 or 3 to come, right? There's a good chance that the people you really need on your team are already involved in ministry somewhere else. And this is just not the time for them. But you want to get this in their mind, get this in their prayer consideration of something they might be called to do. if you need a resource, I'm about to walk you through this process. But if you need a resource, we've written a little book. My buddy Nate Stratton and I wrote a book called Building Your Volunteer Team, which actually does this in boot camp fashion, where you spend 2 hours a day over 30 days recruiting your volunteers. If you're interested in seeing more about this, well, here it is. Sustainable recruiting. I'm gonna walk you through these 6 or 7 steps, and we believe this is immensely doable. The reason we don't have volunteers usually is not because it can't happen, but because we don't work the process. The process almost always works. So here's the first principle. We decide to invest in partners first and then helpers. So I want to describe the difference between a partner and a helper. A partner, just imagine my mom dies and I'm at home and you're coming to visit me. If you are a partner, when you walk out the door, you say something like, hey, I've got food covered for the next week, or hey, I'll help the kids get rides to school this week, or you don't have to worry, I'll be back tomorrow, right? As a partner, I carry away the responsibility to take the next step. A helper, on the other hand, walks out the door and says, call me if you need me. In other words, the next step is on the back of the other person, right? You certainly need helpers. You need people to bring chili, and you need people to drive for the trip, or those sort of things. But the truth is, you need partners, and the partners can manage their own helpers. Okay, so here's step 1. Step 1 is you just want to create your list of needs. Figure out what are all of our volunteer recruiting needs for this year. Maybe it's small group leaders, maybe it's people to help in worship, maybe it's musicians. Just list all of those needs out and put a blank by each one of them. So if you need 3 Sunday school teachers, you put 3 blanks there. The next thing you do is you create your pool. This is the pool of prospective volunteers who might serve in one of these areas of need. And so generally we think you want that pool to be 3 times bigger than your needs list. So if you have a needs list of 20, you're going to need to have about 60 on your pool. You're just coming up with names of people that might serve in these various roles. And remember, these are the partner roles, not the helper roles. You're making the list of your prospects. This is where it usually breaks down because we don't spend enough time building our pool. You may not know enough people to fill that pool list. So you're going to go to people in the church who do know people. You're going to talk to the staff. You're going to talk to anybody else that you can find who might help you fill that list. So you got 2 lists. One is your needs list and one is your list of names. So 20 needs and 60 names, right? The next thing you do is you're going to rank that list. In the left-hand column, you're just going to rank them like in school, A, B, and C. A is they'd be awesome, B is they'd be pretty good, and C is maybe only in a pinch. On the right-hand column of that list, you're going to write another letter, and we like to use the term WEB, web, because it kind of ties in with this whole notion of providing a web of support for the people in our congregation. W is with people, B is behind the scenes, and E is either one. So if they're really good organizers, but maybe not so great with people, that would be behind the scenes. If there are folks that are really great with people, maybe not that great at organizing things, you're going to put a W there to be with people. And if they're good at both, you're going to put an E. The next thing you're going to do is the match. You're going to take a name from your pool, your ranked pool list, and you're going to drop it on your needs list. Just slot in a name in each of those spots. You've already done these 4 steps and you haven't made the first call, you haven't made sent the first email. Step 5 is you're going to start making your connections. Generally, I like to send sort of a shot across the bow that's a 2-sentence email that says we're putting together our team for the 7th grade guys, and I really think you'd be great at that. Do you have any interest in a conversation? Right, something very simple. Then you're going to, typically when we send an email or a phone call, we don't get a response back. And so the step 6 is the follow-up. We do it every week, following up until we get a response, yes or no, either way. We don't have to feel desperate. We're just gonna keep asking each week trying to find out if they're a yes or no. And even with the no's, we can say, we're going to, I just want you to know you're one of the few people gifted in this area in our congregation, and I'm going to come back next year and ask you again. All right. So I just want you to have that word. It's a very sort of straightforward process. It really just, it's not complicated. It's just hard. It just takes a lot of kind of granular work. I love this quote from Thomas Edison. Opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks a lot like work. Well, that's as much as we can go for at this point. If you'd like to talk further, or if you'd like to have we've got on the screen, the final slide on the screen is as a diagnostic that if you'd like to do just to do an overall diagnostic of your whole ministry and would like to look at the systems of your whole ministry, you can click that link, and then either I or somebody else on our team can kind of walk you through and process that. Well, blessings on you as you go and empower people, equip people for ministry in the places that they've been called.